We can slowly get going. For those of y'all joining us for the first time, welcome. The Aspen Gathering is just meant for a space for everyone in the community to get together and have a conversation. We do have a couple of agenda items today. I will throw the meeting notes in the chat as well for those of y'all that want to follow along. Let's see. We typically don't go through introductions, but if you want to just unmute and speak or throw comments in the chat, you can respond with thumbs up, all the things. Just respond however you'd like. Feel free to contribute whenever you want, and you can just introduce yourself as you do contribute. We can start with Arlington Public Library, if y'all are comfortable going ahead and talking about Google Analytics and how you're using that in Aspen.
Sure. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. I'm doing my audio through the phone, but I'm doing the video through my desktop. So I'll try to share my desktop if you want to try that. How do I do that?
You see a green share button at the bottom?
Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, there it is. Okay. And also I'll do screen. And there, okay. So let me grab a link and I'll pass this link into the chat so you can also see it that way. Not there. 1 second. Now, how do I get back to that? No, I don't know. Anyway, it's a link to the Google Docs or the Google support on how to do cross-domain site tracking. Let me pull that one up. I don't know if you can see it. Can anybody read that, or should I try to magnify my screen a little bit?
Yeah, you might need to magnify a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. Thanks.
Okay. Great. So this is pertaining to Google Analytics. Are any of you, most of you, using Google Analytics already on any of your sites? I know most people have it installed already by default with Aspen. Is that right or not, Mark?
Most people actually aren't using Google Analytics with Aspen, but it's innate. It is available by default to anybody that wants to have their own Google Analytics. So a lot of people are just using the analytics built straight into Aspen. But yeah, the Google Analytics gives you some extra capabilities.
Okay, so I was more going to be talking about a sort of more advanced version of Google Analytics, which is the cross-domain tracking, which of course you can always do the regular Google Analytics. It's very similar, and it looks like you can see this yellow banner across the top that says this article is about universal analytics. If you're using the next generation of Google Analytics, refer to the Google Analytics 4 properties. So I am using the older version, which they're called Universal Analytics, and which I think used to be just called Google Analytics. And then we have multiple web properties, multiple websites, and in the Google Analytics terminology, they call them web properties. So Aspen, our Aspen catalog installation is one of those. We have a WordPress website. That's another one of our properties. We have SpringShare, LiveGuides, and LibCal, and a few other assorted sites that we use, and each of those are considered like web properties. And if you want to use Google Analytics, you would have to set up a property ID for any site that you want to track through Google Analytics. And it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and you can search to find instructions on how to do that. And this particular talk that I had prepared is about using Google Analytics on multiple sites, which they call cross-domain tracking or cross-domain measurement, and they also call it site linking. So that's taking the regular Google Analytics one step further. So for those of you who are already using it and you have multiple sites, this is how you would do that. If none of you or some of you are not using Google Analytics at all, you can still use it, but some of it wouldn't really pertain. But the first thing you would need to do if you haven't done anything with Google Analytics is have a Google account, and then you go in there, then you would create an analytics tracking number or property ID for your site or for the properties that you want to track, and then you would plug that code into the head of our website, and there's probably a sample of it further down here. So there's kind of like standard boilerplate code that you get to do that. And for the cross domain, you could set up an additional property that would be tracking multiple domains or multiple websites. So in the case of Arlington, we've done something where our individual web properties have their own tracking ID, and then we also created a tracking ID for the cross domain. So what that does is when Google looks at the analytics, it associates the different websites as all part of one session when you set it up that way. And so when you look at your stats, you can see someone started out, maybe they started out on your informational website and they went from there to the catalog, and then maybe they went from there somewhere else. You'd see that. Or if they started out in your catalog and maybe there was a link in there to a live guide page, then you could track them across all of those visits in multiple different web properties. And that's what we were trying to do. And so luckily the Google help documents are pretty thorough, and they go through all the steps to do it. But the main thing is you would have to create the property IDs, and if you already have a property ID for Aspen or for a website they're using, you create another one for the cross-domain tracking, and that's so that's the step here: set up a property in your analytics account, and then they give you some boilerplate code, and you need to plug in the tracking ID, which they got like a dummy one here, and then you would put in all the different domain names of all the other sites that you want to link to that one there. And if you haven't done any of this before, this is probably going to be more foreign, but I'll show you an example of what it looks like in practice. So this is the source code for one of our live guides pages, library.arlingtonva.liveguides.com, and I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. So there's a lot of junk in here, but there we go. So this is all within the head part of the website. So if any of you have any experience with HTML and creating websites, there's a header section, and that's where the script, which is a JavaScript chunk that comes from Google, that's where you'd insert that. And so it's like the generic version of it that you get from Google, this part, and the part you'd have to customize is down here. So this would be a universal analytics tracking number that we created for the cross-domain tracking. And then down here is where you plug in the domains of all the different other sites that you want to track. So you would not include the domain of the site that the code is on, but you'd put the domain of all the other sites that you want to track along this one, with this one. So you can see we've got library.arlingtonva.us libcat. That's I think that's an old catalog, or that's the catalog site. Libsys is one of our old catalog URLs, mlibsys. There's live guides. There's an Arlington Archives website. These are all different website domains. And on each of those sites, pull up another one. So this is one of the other sites where we're implementing it. And so on this one, you'd use the cross-domain tracking ID, and then you put in all the other websites that you want to track. And here's an example where this website, which is the projectdaps.org, so it has its own Google ID for tracking this separately, and that's up here. And then there's the cross-domain tracking ID is here, so you can have them both at the same time. So if you already have websites or if you already have Aspen set up with Google tracking, you just add this to that. And so you get both. You'd have individual analytics for one site and then a way to view traffic across different websites as if it were one session in a separate view. And that's pretty much the basics of it. I know the implementation will depend on the different websites. Like with Aspen, it's set up that you can plug in your ID and it sticks it in there, but you might need special help because this part is not standard. The cross domain is a little bit of extra code, and you have to configure it specifically for your installation to get it to work right. And then if you have like a CMS, like we have WordPress, there might be plugins that you can use that will make it easier to do that, but they may not, again, they may not have support for the cross-domain extra code, so you might have to do that customized. So let me see if anyone has any questions so far. If you want me to go over anything else.
Would it be possible to see an example of how this looks in the Google Analytics? Or
yes, we can do that. Let me find, yeah, here we go. So I was prepared for that question.
Cool.
Let me make this larger. So I don't know if anyone has looked at Google Analytics before, but there's a lot to it. I mean, I am just a neophyte really in even understanding most of this stuff. But when you first log in, there's a little thing up here that says all accounts and then cross-domain tracking. So that is the name of that I gave this website property, and then all website data. If you toggle this, you can see, so these are separate Google Analytics accounts that I have access to. So I'm logged into the Google Analytics application, I guess, through a personal or work associated Google account. And through that, I have access to this APL, which is Arlington Public Library account. And then there's also Arlington VA, which is the Arlington County has their own set of Google Analytics properties. And so I have access to that as well. So this is like the top level, and I would choose which account I want to look at. So that's this one. And then within this, there are multiple properties. So you can see here, there's a little number UA106, blah, 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 blah. So that is the Universal Analytics tracking number. The first part is like the matches this number here, so it's part of this account. And the second part after the dash is the particular property that belongs to the parent account. And so these are ones that we've set up to track different things. And this is the cross-domain tracking. And then you go here, and then you get all website data, and that takes us back to here. So that's what we're looking at. And then see what are some of the behaviors. Somewhere there's page views. It's like the navigation gets more and more complicated. Okay, here's page views. So we can just look at that real quickly. And here's, a graph. It's all this stuff is super customizable, and it's more or less real time, and you can select any little parameters that you want to view it all kinds of different ways. So most of our top results are from the library.arlingtonva.account, but if you scroll further, you'll probably see some examples where there's different, okay, here's one, arlingtonva.libcal.com. So that's one of our other websites. And so yes, most of the top results are our main WordPress website. But somewhere, arlingtonva.libcal, so there's a few other ones. But the idea is that you can see multiple websites all together under one collection, tracking visits across them. So here's a column for page views, unique page views, average time on page. It's super, super customizable, and there's tons and tons of data to look at, like site search, events, publisher. Like, I don't even know half of what all this stuff is. I'm not the primary person who looks at the analytics. I just try to make sure that everything is set up correctly so that when other people look at it, they have the data that they need to make sense of how our websites are being used. So And I think there's lots of tutorials, like probably on YouTube and probably on Google itself, if you want to get a better feel for how to use the analytics once you've set it up. So, and more questions along those lines?
So you went for the library catalog.
Yes.
You're getting information that's not available through Aspen Discovery Layer. What information are you getting from analytics that you're not that you're missing in Aspen Discovery Layer?
Well, the primary way that Google Analytics works is tracking the URL, and you can add additional pieces to the URL and other parameters to do more customized tracking, but the basic way that it works out of the box is just it just looks at the URL. So one reason why the catalog statistics don't rank very high in our overall traffic is because each search and each individual record that you look at in Aspen has its own unique URL. So that means any one item is not going to score very high in that. But so what you could do, you could probably see your top, maybe your top searches, if they all had a similar URL, you could probably look at them that way. It'd probably take me a while to drill down into this to find examples of it. That would probably take me 10 minutes just to get to that point to try to illustrate how it works. But there are things that you can get through here that you would not get through just the basic. I think Aspen just shows you like sort of total page views as it's set up right now, right? Is one of the basic analytics through the Aspen admin.
Yeah, you can see like total page views and some of the, you can get some of the more specifics, but it's a little more general. Google Analytics definitely gets more granular for sure.
Yeah, it's just like, that's their stock and trade is doing analytics, so it's insanely advanced and customizable, and you can drill down on all kinds of different things as long as it's in the URL. And so you could see it by domain, you could see it by a bunch of other different ways of looking at the data. You can do it across time and configure the time range however you want that. You can do it by the IP of the visitors. So you could, like, if you knew you were having a lot of traffic from inside your building or different buildings, you knew the IP addresses of your library locations, you could see the traffic that way, which I think you can also do in the Aspen admin. But this might be a more precise way of doing it. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. And there's features that are built into Google Analytics that you would have to set up. You can create things called campaigns. So if you had some particular data that you wanted to find, you can add that to URLs and set up, and it will track that. That's, again, kind of more advanced. And you can also track actions. So if you were pretty handy with JavaScript, you can create actions that the website will trigger, like when someone clicks somewhere on a page, that would trigger analytics tracking for that particular action. So you could get very sophisticated tracking for all kinds of different things that happen when the user is using the website. We haven't really done much with that ourselves, so I'm not super versed in it, but I know it's possible. We just haven't really had a reason to, we already get so much, it's already information overload just looking at this to even need anything else more than we really make use of. Any other questions?
I guess this might be more for Mark. Mark, did you say that Google Analytics was already built into the Discovery Layer?
Yes and no. So we will automatically generate all of this code. So a lot of that code that Jonathan was showing for the JavaScript, we can generate all of that for you. You do need to get your own analytics account, your own analytics keys, and that will then it'll automatically populate it on your page. So we just save you some steps, but you still have to go through and actually get the analytics key yourself.
So we send you the key?
There's a Google Analytics or a Google API section in the third-party enrichment, and you just plug it in right there. So.
Oh, we do it ourselves.
You can do it yourself. So make life easy for you.
So if we have leftover Google Analytics IDs from when we were with the Marmot, those don't apply though. We need to get a new ID, right?
Probably.
Okay. All right.
You might be able to reuse them. I don't recall what we were using at that point.
Aspen admin backend, and then here, is this right? Google API settings, is that where that goes?
Yeah, and you can leave
there, and then so yeah, put that. So like Google Analytics tracking ID, so that's kind of small there, but that's so I think this tracking ID was created for us way back in the day, and then but that's we've had that for a long time. And then we have an additional tracking ID for the cross domain, and they're both in there, but that might get a little bit extra setup to do that. So if there's no further questions, I'll turn screen back over.
I had one more question actually. Are we able to add more than one? I should check, but can we add more than one Google Analytics ID to our setup?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so. I was just checking.
As always, ticket and we'll see what we could do. But right now it would be shared. But within Google, you should be able to break it down by domain, I believe. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So even if you have one, I don't know how much access you can control. So that would be the main reason to get multiple.
Yeah. And it would be across all of the catalogs in your instance, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you're a consortium, you'd see everybody's and anybody that you let have. I don't remember if you can control access by.
I don't know if you can control it by, maybe if you made a view for that specific domain and could control access to the view, I think you could do it, but nobody's asked us, or not since I'm with a consortium. Like obviously we have a consortia view, but none of our libraries have asked to add their own Google Analytics setup. So I'll ask if they ask.
Yeah, I think there is a pretty good amount of fine-grained control of permissions. Like assuming you have the top level permissions, you can give other people access to view the analytics for a property, and there's maybe different levels of that, and you can control that. Because I remember that because the number that we're using was originally created, I think, by Marmot, and they owned it, so we had to do something to get them to transfer it to us. So now we own it and control it, and then I had to give other people permission to be able to access. So there definitely are a range of permissions, and that's also another reason why you might want to consider, depending on how you want to look at your analytics, if you might have a property ID for each domain as well as one that tracks all of them together. Just for that permissions is another reason why you may want to do that. It's a possibility.
I'm not sure. Is anybody else using Google Analytics now, or?
We are kind of. I'm using Google Tag Manager just with the JavaScript tool.
Cool.
Oh yeah, one that reminds me there's like the Google Tag Manager. That's another way to do it, and like I think I was showing that there's sort of a next generation of Google Analytics that allows you to track app and website stuff together. So that might be of interest as you're developing the app, to start looking into either upgrading or at least investigating that type of tracking. And I think when I was reading the documentation on that, you can do both. So you can have the sort of old school tracking that's already built in, and you can also add the next generation. They can both work together. And Google is also pretty good about backwards compatibility. Like if you have like really old school tracking code, it still usually works many years past its, sell-by date, because Google wants to keep that information for themselves, so they make sure that it still works.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Does anyone else have questions for Jonathan? Or just about Google Analytics in general? Sweet.
So if there's something in Google Analytics that we think might be useful, we could also just ask Aspen if they could add that kind of tracking to the usage stats that you provide through whatever you're using, right?
Sorry, I missed that.
So if there's something in Google Analytics that we think might be helpful, but we don't want to go through the, for me, rather confusing Google Analytics, I could just open a ticket and say, Mark, could you give us stats on what the platform they're using, how many people we get using, what percent we get using Android, and what percent we get using iOS, and what percent we get using computer, PC, or top 10 searches. We just ask you because you could get similar statistics through what you're using.
Yeah, we're always looking to add.
Okay. I think that'd be easier for us.
Yeah, good point, Joe. Any other questions before we move on to our next topic for today? Thank you again, Jonathan. We'll have to find a good cookie delivery place in Arlington. All right, so next we are going to dive a little bit into kind of contributions to the code base and documentation. So as all y'all know, Aspen is open source, which means y'all can contribute, whether it's to the code or to the manual, and we can just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think this is a topic that several people have brought up in terms of, so I think we just want to kind of know, like, what are your needs in terms of wanting to contribute? We've talked a little bit about maybe doing a separate training for like how to install Aspen, how to set it up if you did want to contribute code, set up a local development machine. I don't know how many people would be interested in that. Anybody interested in learning how to set up a local development machine? We'll go for the like harder thing to do first.
100. Let's do that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we can see about, it sounds like maybe we'll have a handful of people that do that. So maybe we'll work on doing that a little later, probably next month. We can try to set up a time that works for all the people that are interested in setting up development. Yeah, so we've got, it sounds like 3 or 4 libraries interested. So that'd be great. So that's contributing code. The other thing that we've talked about is contributing documentation, knowledge bases, or just Q&A and that kind of thing. Right now, the documentation is all built into Aspen. We've got documentation on how to contribute to the documentation. So there's a nice little video about how to do it, but it does require you to set up GitHub, and you make pull requests, and then they deploy with the next release. We've talked about trying to reduce the barriers to entry to that, which probably means finding another tool that everybody could log into so that we could all contribute. Who all would be interested? I guess, who all is interested in contributing documentation in the current form, and then would people be more interested in contributing if it was easier to contribute?
I'm sorry, I missed, what is the current form for documentation?
So right now it's Markdown that lives within GitHub. So you can edit it, but then you provide a pull request and we merge it in for you. So the actual writing's really easy. It's just a little harder to contribute.
I think if it was a little bit easier, there might be some interest. You know, if I could just send you a Word document or whatever, and you could just plug it in. Because you should, don't you think you should approve the documentation before? I mean, you're doing that now, I assume.
Yeah.
Pull request, yeah.
Yeah, I think we could definitely do a workshop on how to do the contribution, and everybody could contribute a little bit. Okay. I guess, does anybody have amazing tools that they work with on a regular basis for documentation or knowledge bases or any of that that we should be looking at? Okay. Well, we will keep looking and investigating and see what will work. But I think maybe short term, we'll just try to schedule a couple of boot camps, one to do how to set up a development environment for local development, and one for how to contribute code.
I think I was the person that had brought this up in the last gathering. And I guess I had a very specific question in the sense of, if we were going to work on a particular area of the documentation, my assumption was that, like, maybe we should mention this in the documentation channel of the Aspen Slack, right? So you guys know it's coming. If anyone else is interested, maybe they would, be interested and could coordinate, that kind of thing. I was just thinking, like, if there was a better way to go about it as a community member, other than just giving you a pull request out of the blue, right? That's where my head was at. Like, if the community was going to start making regular contributions, is there a better way to do this besides, cold call pull requests? I mean, that might be outside of, the meeting today, or maybe just as an open source project, maybe Aspen isn't there yet for that kind of conversation, right? About how to organize the community, that kind of thing. But that's what I was thinking about.
Cool. Yeah, good thoughts. I guess at this point we're not overwhelmed with pull requests for documentation. I think posting something in the documentation channel would be great. Probably, let's see. We do have we have a documentation channel in the Aspen channel. So feel free to say, like, hey, I'm going to start working on this area. Certainly Addie and Morgan are working on documentation. So at least letting them know so they're not diving into it would be good. Yeah, but I don't mind pull requests out of the blue. They're always fun to look at and review it, and it always makes Aspen better.
So one big change that was kind of on my mind that I thought would be useful, at least for our staff, is split the documentation between regular user and admin user. Now that would be a big change. Mm-hmm. It requires significant revision, or possibly change the way the help manual works, so you only see the documentation for the permissions that you have. That's outside of my the coding capabilities, right? So, but there's some things I'm thinking about, like sending staff to the manual, and there's like all this stuff there that like doesn't apply to their job at all. It's like, what is this? So I look at all that stuff, and even the services that we don't use, I'm grateful that it's there and it's very enlightening. But for other folks, I think it could be overwhelming.
Yeah. Which might be a reason to keep all the documentation inside Aspen, because it's easier then for us to say like, oh, okay, if you don't have the permission to create a collection spotlight, there's no reason to show the collection spotlight documentation to you. That's kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, that is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But now that we're speaking about this, I mean, I love that the help manual is in Aspen, right? I think that's great. I think what you're doing with release notes is great too. Like that transparency is very positive.
Cool. Are there other types of documentation that people would think is useful, or removing documentation sections by permissions? What can we do to help you all more?
Yeah, if y'all have any ideas after this, feel free to throw them in that documentation channel. And we can dig into that. And sounds like we will plan on making some sort of workshop / boot camp and getting with y'all to schedule that. So I have for sure that Swan, Arlington, and Nashville want to be a part of the local development chat, but we'll include it for anyone that wants to join, of course, and we'll keep in touch. We'll let y'all know what we decide there.
Is the documentation channel something you have to request access for, or I don't see it on my list?
I believe if you're in the Aspen workspace, you can add a channel if you don't see it. So if you go next to the little channels header and you click add channel, you can browse channels. And then you can see all of the ones that you're allowed to add. Cool. All right. Any other last thoughts for documentation before we move on?
This is Keisha at APL, Arlington Public. I'm just going to play devil's advocate because I'm of the knowledge of like the situations where I don't know things exist until I see it in documentation. If I don't know I have the permit, if I don't have the permissions to them, and it will solve. And sometimes it's been able to solve some problems. It's just because I didn't see it and didn't know it existed, and therefore, if it was turned on for me, I could, But and sometimes people don't know that because I don't have permissions to certain things, I wouldn't see something or it causes another thing. So I'm of the opinion that being able to see the documentation is a good thing, but I could see how it gets overwhelming when it's not has nothing to do with what you don't want. But
yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, so maybe we could do some sort of an option to say either show all the documentation or only show my documentation, so that you could either be overwhelmed or not.
Nice. Any other thoughts or comments? Sweet. Well, so the next thing we want to talk about is potentially some Aspen Weekly topics. I'll pass it over to Cal.
Hi. So I posted in Slack maybe like a week or two ago about just a topic that we were thinking about doing, trying to get some feedback about your migration experiences from a library point of view, just to put something together in an Aspen Weekly to help other libraries that are, that we're onboarding and that are going to experience the same thing that you guys did. So I would love if anyone has any like contributions to that. I can totally keep it anonymous if you want. I can just say, a library said this was their experience, or this worked for them, or this didn't work for them. We just need help from you guys who went through it from the library perspective. So I added it to the notes, but little things like, how did you roll it out to your patrons? How did you Like tell them, like, did you guys do testing? Did you do surveys? How did you market it? We've kind of seen different examples of like what worked, but we would like to hear from you. And if you did any like beta testing or soft launches, of course, anything like that, I would love to hear from you. My email address is Colleen@bywatersolutions.com. I put it in the notes. I can put it in the chat, or you can DM me in Slack. And like I said, we can totally keep it anonymous. It's more just getting the content about what worked and what didn't work. Any questions? We would appreciate it. We're not in libraries anymore right now, so, but we've been there before, so we just want your information. Do you want me to keep going with the other topic?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing we wanted to talk about was conferences. As 2022 is approaching, there's going to be more in-person conferences. It seems like most of this year will remain virtual, but we just wanted to let you know like what conferences Bywater is attending. And we put together a new page on our website, bywatersolutions.com/conference. I dropped the link in the chat. So that has information on, we'll update it as we know which ones that we will be attending. So we hope to definitely see all of you at different ones throughout the country. But also we put in a section specifically about presenting at conferences. I just started kind of reaching out to some people about opportunities, but if you ever do want to speak about open source, Aspen, discovery layers, you know, if you were on the COA ILS, we would love, we're always looking for like new topics, and we have opportunities of sponsorship for travel costs and conference talks, the conference costs. So all that's available for you to read over on the conference website. And if you have any questions, again, please just reach out to me. We love to, you know, get our partners up in front of an audience and share information with other people. So yeah, any questions about that? All right, short and sweet because we only have 15 more minutes.
Thanks, Cal. Okay, so the last topic today is the app. So I'll let Mark dive into that.
So Christopher was able to provide us with a working app. And we've been busy trying to get it up and running. It is, or it was up and running. We're just working on getting it all compiled and adapted so that everybody's interfaces are available. It is currently available on expo.io. So there is a test platform while we're kind of refining it and making sure that it's all perfect for our first release. I dropped the link into the channel. Basically, you will need to install Expo Go from the App Store. It'll work on both Android and Apple. You install Expo Go. If you navigate to that page so navigate to the link in a browser, it'll bring up a QR code. You scan the QR code and that will open the app. This does require a little bit of a change to code on everybody's servers. So I will be deploying a version 21.07.01 later today to everybody's site. Right now, I've got everybody who is currently in production in the app. So anybody whose site is currently in production will be able to play with it. We can open it up to other people that are currently being implemented as well, if you're interested in that. Right now, it is set up for, if you're in a consortial interface, it will go to the consortia site. Any initial questions, or I can try to share my phone and we can look at it. Any questions before I share though? Let's see.
Where did you put that information?
It's, oh, sorry. I chatted it. Now it's in the chat. No, Zoom's not going to work for sharing. Sorry about that. So it's very similar to the interface that Christopher's shown off before. Basically, you're going to log in. You are going to select your library. You'll enter your barcode and PIN, and then you'll be taken to a Discover page where you can browse. All of your existing browse categories will show up. You can select a title, place holds, all of your account information will be shown. We're working on some of the configuration to make it a little easier as we add new libraries and that kind of thing, to be easier on the administration area. And then we'll be working to publish it out. But we'd love people to start taking a look at it. There is an app channel in Slack. So provide whatever feedback you have there. Hopefully we can get a robust discussion going of what people want. And we'll kind of build out in phases. My thought is we'll probably just be deploying new versions of the app with new versions of Aspen. So I currently have the version set to 21.08, which is the next version coming out. And then we'll do 21.09, 21.10, etc.
Mark, if someone scans the QR code and it says no usable data found, do you know what we should do or can do? I got a message that happened, and it happened to me too. I'm on an iPhone, so I'm not sure.
Did you install Expo Go first?
Nope. So we need to.
So install Expo Go, and then scanning that should open Expo Go, and you'll be able to.
Sorry.
Yep. I see everybody busily installing.
Everyone's heads are down now.
Yeah. So right now the login's not going to work until we get 21.07.01 deployed everywhere. That should happen pretty much right after this meeting. So by tomorrow morning, please log in and take a look. And if there's anybody that's not in production that wants to see it, let me know.
Mark, I'll put the link that you shared in the actual app Slack channel too.
Perfect. Yep.
So they can look at it tomorrow or afterwards.
Yeah. And then I know one of the topics that people have asked about is, are we charging for it or not? Or how are we going to charge for it? What we have decided is that all existing partners right now there will be no additional charge for the app. At least until contract renewal times come out, we do think we will need to be charging for the app at some point. But definitely we're not charging for it initially. So all existing partners will get it included in what you're already paying for support. So, and again, if anybody's interested in contributing development time to the app, like Christopher has, we would love people to keep developing. So that it helps to have the community. So. Any questions on the app or anything?
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's really fun to have it out there now. So I imagine that it will probably take us a month and a half or so before we're really ready to release it to the public. So sometime end of summer, I would expect you'd be able to start having patrons at least try it out, or at least other staff.
Cool. Does anyone have questions about the app or?
Yeah, I kind of walked in halfway through that. So how do you get the app? I'm at the QR code thing, but it's not a URL. It's some other weird thing.
So you will need to install Expo Go from the App Store. And then you will be able to, when you scan that code, it'll automatically launch Expo Go. And this is just while we're developing it, trying things out, just a way for us to give you kind of early access while we're still building in the functionality. So.
Is Expo Go only on iOS?
Nope, it's available on both Android and iOS. So.
Awesome.
Of course, big thanks to Christopher for getting us this far. So it's did a ton of work, and thanks.
Thank you, Christopher. I'll have to send you cookies too. Or not Starbucks, but that other one that y'all do. Tim Hortons. Yeah, that one. Cool. Any other questions about the app or where we are in the timeline or anything at all about that?
So with this app, is it just going to be like we would tell them to download Aspen Discovery, or would it be like you would get a branded version of your library's app?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out. So it kind of depends on how hard it is to do both. It might be more like Libby, where it's download the Aspen app and then you get to pick your library. Right now, this app is just pick your library out of the set that we have. So.
Awesome. Well, we have 5 minutes left. We can talk a little bit about development if we want. I'm sure app's the most exciting thing though, and the release has been out for a week now. So if you all have any questions about that, if there's anything else in general you want to talk about, if there's something that y'all want to talk about next month, let me know. Is there anything at all? Now everyone's just looking at the app.
Hey, thanks everyone. Good job, Christopher, on the app and everyone else. That's awesome. 476 Aspen Discovery locations, branches in like 2 years. That's pretty amazing. Growing community. It's so cool. Taking a chance in the dark a couple of years ago to see this happen. Pretty amazing.
So if we find issues with the app, is there like a page we report bugs to, or?
Yeah, for now, let's go ahead and just put them into either put them into the app channel on the Aspen Discovery Slack, or feel free to just submit a ticket to us.